Over the past 10, 20 years, we've watched this gig economy come into play. And the premise of our firm is leveraging resources on a less than full-time basis in many, many cases. Sometimes clients get hung up on the terminology, the difference between outsourcing, fractional, and interim. Maybe give us some thoughts on what do those terms mean?
Yeah, so for me, fractional is a part-time employee resource of sorts that comes in and they are a strategic partner that helps you grow. So you're not outsourcing the function, and when you think of outsourcing, it's more solution-oriented. It's not necessarily something that is going to be strategic and for long-term growth. Whereas fractional is someone that can come in with flex time as needed, 10 hours this week, 5 hours this week, 40 hours the next, and help get you where you want to be. And then long-term, as you become a 200, 300 person organization, help you build out the function and bring it in-house.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, what we see in finance and accounting is folks that really want to outsource want to get rid of the core bookkeeping and the transaction processing pieces. But there's still this big need for that strategic financial leadership, which is where either from a controller reviewing the entries or reviewing the outsourced work product, or a CFO helping provide that strategic financial guidance. That's where the value add of a fractional resource, because it's a dedicated person or a dedicated team that they're relying on. So you have a relationship with them. They understand you, they understand the company. It makes such a difference that you can have those open, honest conversations because they're part of your team.
An interim usually comes into play when there's a situation that's occurred in a role where somebody has exited the business and they need somebody to run the operation for a period of time. And sometimes that is a full-time role, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we see it all the time where senior financial leaders walk out the door for whatever reason. They're taking another job. Maybe they're not performing to the right set of skills, or maybe as the company has grown, they don't have the right capabilities. So they need to bring in higher powered resources, frankly. And that's something that we can constantly provide a sense of those folks who've been there, done it, understand what it means to come in, take over leadership, provide guidance to the team, build out processes and procedures. So you get to a steady state that is easier than to bring in a full-time replacement.
In HR, we often see that a company is going to divest, and so it happens quick, the sale happens overnight, and they don't have time to make the appropriate hire, nor do they know what the function is going to look like in the new organizational structure. So we can go in, all hands on deck, build that out, see what they need, and then onboard the new person, offboard ourselves. That's one situation. Sometimes I field calls where the head of HR or even HR team has walked out. Those are never ideal because you want to deep dive into what situation caused that so we can resolve those issues. But HR folks know how to navigate the systems. They know how to quit. And so our team can go in without any notice and kind of roll our sleeves up and say, all right, let's start calling the vendors. Let's start talking to the employees. Let's get these systems up and running and be that solution so that it's not a crisis.
Right. We use the term flexibility, which I think is one of the greatest assets of using this kind of talent pool, right? Is being able to leverage resources as you need them, and sort of in the dose that you talked about needing them, scaling with an organization. And then how do you see cost efficiency playing into this kind of a hire?
Oftentimes a client or prospective client will get hung up. I can't afford a retainer. Is there like a minimum? Is there a maximum? Is this a subscription? We can do all of those, but we can also do hourly, and we're going to build it to make financial sense for you. If you as the client get to a point where you're spending more on our resource than you would to make the internal hire, then we start looking at, does it make cost benefit sense?
Yeah.
It might make sense because you might want access to our bench, because you might want the subject matter expertise that our team brings, and so you want to pay a little bit more so that you don't have to hire multiple resources all at once. Or it might not make sense at all, in which case we're ready to help you transition and hire the right person.
One of the things that comes top of mind to me when we talk about cost efficiency and the ability to hire, so even if an organization can afford the full-time strategic resource, what they need to evaluate is, can we leverage that full-time resource 100%? And because if you hire that person, they're going to be very impactful, be challenged. So you don't want to overhire before it's time. So leveraging high-level strategic resources on a less than full-time basis makes perfect sense for scaling companies.
Yeah, I think where we see the value of that is the ability to have a team available, fractional basis, interim basis, where certain expertise can be leveraged in smaller dosage. So you don't want your fractional or interim CFO doing journal entries in your GL. right? You want them reviewing that. You want them providing the cash flow forecasting, strategic financial guidance on debt or equity. Those are the value adds there. So being able to leverage the right type of person, the right type of consultant for the right role is really critical. And that's cost effective as well.
Well, I know we are often called in for times of crisis, or a transaction is occurring or some sort of transition's happening. So maybe talk a little bit about those examples of when we get those calls.
It happens all the time. Nearly every week I'm getting calls of, hey, we're getting ready to do a transaction, or we'd like to, work with the investment bank, about trying to get some investments. Part of what we do is then come in, assess what the needs are. In some cases, it's moving from cash to accrual basis so that they can have a better valuation. Sometimes it's just cleaning up the function because it maybe hasn't been structured to provide the value that the organization really needs. So really coming in, getting under the covers, understanding the needs, and then building out that roadmap of here are things that you need to take on over the next period of time to fix this so that you're ready for that next step in your organizational growth.
And I think with HR, oftentimes something's been flagged from a compliance standpoint. And they say, well, we don't have a lot of issues. It's just this one little thing we need you to look at. Yeah. And it's more of a lack of education on the company's part. Usually if there's one little compliance flag, there's dozens of issues. And especially saw a ton of this post-COVID, because during COVID, people began to hire remote, willy-nilly, not realizing that every employee in different states comes with different compliance laws, and none of them were being hired in a way that was compliant. And then you get one IRS flag on one particular tax thing, and that's not the issue at all. Nothing's been done from a compliance standpoint. And so we go in, clean it all up, pay any fees that need to be paid, and then steady the ship so that you can find a resource to manage it going forward.
Yeah. One of the things I think is probably one of our greatest assets is this concept of independence and candor. Leveraging resources from an outside firm to come in and help you understand the actual current state of your organization. Our team is not afraid to tell our clients what they need to hear versus employees, which sometimes are kind of walking this sort of tightrope because they want to be open and honest and provide candid feedback, but they're also concerned about keeping their job, right? Where we can be completely independent. I think that's been a real asset. Can you think of scenarios where that's really come into play?
I think some of our greatest successes are exactly because of that, right? The ability to kind of get in, diagnose the situation, provide open and honest feedback, because our consultants their employment is not contingent on them keeping the CEO, the founder of that organization happy. I find the best client relationships we have are with those that we have done that in the past, and they're open. And whether that was getting ready to do an acquisition, like you're not ready for this right now. Like you don't have the institutional advanced knowledge, processes, procedures to be able to incorporate another organization and do it correctly. Or let us work with the banks and try to structure a debt financing solution that makes sense. Because if not, your return on investment is not going to be there. So we can't recommend that. So those are situations that we face every day. And I think the clients that keep coming back to us, they value those relationships.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that outsourcing conversation too. So oftentimes if my consultants end up doing really transactional work, they get bored because they're not the strategic partner anymore. And they're going to come forward and be like, Laura, I'm bored, put me on another account. And that's usually a sign that we have to go to the client and say, hey, we actually can make this cheaper for you if it's just transactional. We'll find you the right resource. And then likewise, sort of to your point about being able to have candor with the clients, there's also sometimes, unfortunately, every now and again, we'll get clients who are trying to outsource because they know they're not really following the rules, and they're hoping by paying someone else that they can kind of continue to skirt the rules. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to say, hey, this is the right way, the legal way, the compliant way. And oftentimes they don't like that. They can go find the outsourced solution.
One of the things I pride our organization, our culture on is the fact that we really don't sell services here, right? We have conversations and people engage us for brainstorming around the challenges that they're facing. And we figure out whether or not that's the right kind of scenario for us to help solve. Or I think the fact that we are well connected super regionally, we're able to then identify the right kinds of resources that they should go seek out. Again, that independence thing is a real asset for us. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about how do you leverage outside resources and trying to select partners and you want to talk through that, call us. We'd love to have a conversation with you about what's the right solution for you and your business and your team.